job.
Thank you, Bill. That's very kind. And I've learned one thing already tonight I didn't know. Never speak after Dr. Rivers. But here we are. Those were inspiring and beautiful remarks, and so important to hear on this occasion. Well, tonight we are gathered after all these months, Bill, of work and putting this charter together. We're gathered in this shrine, really, to American principles and ideals, to sign and celebrate the American Charter of Freedom of Religion and Conscience. So let me add my gratitude to all those at the Religious Freedom Institute and everyone else, like Dr. Rivers, who helped to make this night possible. And I want to take this moment to give a personal word of thanks to the principal drafter of the Charter, Os Guinness, who was mentioned earlier, but I want to have my say as well. His wisdom, his vision, his eloquence have inspired me and so many other people over the years. Thank you so much, Oz. Where are you? Where are you? There you are. I can honestly say, Oz, and I wasn't going to say this, but I'm going to add it, I wouldn't be here tonight without you. There's no question. You've shaped my career and my life. Well, surely we are due a night of celebration at this divided and dangerous moment for religious freedom at home and abroad. After all, the American Charter represents the first time in more than 3 decades that Americans of so many faiths and beliefs from all sides of the current debates over the meaning of the First Amendment have joined together to reaffirm a shared commitment to the inalienable right of freedom of conscience, freedom of religion, not for some, but for all. So why then do I not feel more celebratory? And I suspect I'm not alone in that. Because to put it bluntly, I am deeply worried that our arrangement in religious freedom is at risk. Just weeks ago, 11 people were murdered and 4 wounded during Shabbat morning services at Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. And like most Americans, I am still stunned, saddened, sick at heart, struggling yet again to make sense of the senseless. What should be unthinkable is now becoming commonplace in the land of the free. Only days before the Tree of Life attack, you might remember, a gunman in Kentucky tried to force his way into a black church. Failing that, he went to a nearby grocery store and murdered 2 African Americans. You know, perpetuators of religious and racial hate crimes in America today are ecumenical. Synagogues, mosques, churches, temples are all targets of vandalism, assaults, and violence, from the massacre of 6/6 in the Wisconsin temple, to the bombing of a mosque in Minnesota, to the murder of 9 people at Mother Emanuel Church in South Carolina. A wave of violence in recent years has spared no faith or creed. Any mass murder is horrific and tragic, but as President Obama put it following the tragedy in Charleston, there is something particularly heartbreaking about the death happening in a place in which we seek solace. We seek peace, a place of worship. For me personally, the lesson of surging white supremacy, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, nativism in America today, the lesson is that constitutions, laws, alone do not and cannot guarantee religious freedom or peaceful coexistence. No, religious freedom is only possible in a society where people are not only free, but also safe to live their faith openly and freely without fear that someone might rip off their head covering, desecrate their place of worship, or bully their children in a school. Absent a safe environment sustained by the civic virtue of average citizens, the First Amendment becomes what James Madison might refer to, if he were here, as a parchment barrier. If we are to be truly free, we must be fully safe. How tragic it is, then, that religious freedom in the United States has become a point of contention and division at the very moment our need for agreement on first principles, on the First Amendment, has never been greater or more urgent. Angry voices on all sides shout past one another, turning clashes over competing claims into a zero-sum game. Our collective failure to negotiate areas of disagreement in good faith, with rare exceptions like those courageous people in Utah who worked out the Utah Compromise, our collective failure undermines public support for religious freedom, a term that now often appears in media scare quotes. And it poisons the well for civil discourse about contentious issues. Culture wars foment a climate of fear and hate, conditions that history teaches can lead to division, intolerance, and even violence. In a chilling tweet that some of you might have seen that went out earlier this week, the Auschwitz Memorial put it this way: when we look at Auschwitz, we see the end of the process. It's important to remember that the Holocaust actually did not start with gas chambers. This hatred gradually developed from words, stereotypes, and prejudice, through legal exclusion, dehumanization, and escalating violence. Well, merely signing the American Charter will not, of course, ensure safety or revive religious freedom, but by joining together to affirm our shared vision of a free and safe society, we can be part of a new beginning, a commitment to do better, to have those difficult conversations, and to find, where possible, and it's not always possible, a common vision for the common good. The American Charter, as you know, is not intended to signal agreement about current law. That's another task altogether, and one that we should engage in. But the Charter is what I would call a hearts and minds document, right? A summons to live up to the vision of the First Amendment by guarding the rights of all, including those with whom we deeply disagree. As you well know, the United States is today one of the most religiously diverse places in the world, and among developed nations, one of the most religious. And if we are to have any hope of living with these deep differences going forward, especially our religious differences, we must now do the hard work of renewing our shared commitment to the core civic principles and ideals that bind us together as a people. This is the opportunity and the hope offered by the Williamsburg, the American Charter. But, you know, I'm sorry, Oz. The Williamsburg Charter lives on. And in a way, this is its successor in our time, and more than a way. So it was more than a slip of the tongue. It was an acknowledgement that that was, in that moment, so important to bring us together, just as the American Charter is in this moment, necessary to bring us together. Much is at stake. Much is at stake. Judge Learned Hand perhaps said it best, and this is almost 75 years ago. He was speaking on May 21st, 1944, another time when our nation's character was deeply tested. And he delivered what I'm sure you know is now a very famous address on the spirit of liberty. He spoke as America and our allies were struggling against the greatest enemy of freedom in human history. And it's hard to believe, but more than 1.5 million people gathered in Central Park to hear him. It was called I Am an American Day. I Am an American Day. And in the front of the crowd, there were 150,000 newly naturalized citizens, and that was his main audience. That's who he spoke to. And many of those 150,000 are people who fled violence. They fled persecution, seeking safety and freedom, which is what we're supposed to stand for. And Judge Hand described the spirit of liberty in a personal way first, how he personally understood it. And he said, the spirit of liberty is the spirit which is not too sure that it is right. The spirit which seeks to understand the mind of other men and women. The spirit which weighs their interests alongside its own without bias. And well aware that many of those new Americans in the crowd came from countries that had constitutions, yeah, they had laws, they had courts, but all of that failed to preserve freedom, to preserve democracy. So he warned that we rest our hopes, he said, too much upon constitutions, upon laws, and upon courts. These are false hopes, he said. Believe me, these are false hopes. So, what then? How then should we seek our liberty? And he answered, liberty lies in the hearts of men and women. When it dies there, no constitution, no law, no court can save it. No constitution, no law, no court can even do much to help it. But while it lies there, it needs no constitution, no law, no court to save it. So now, as we sign the American Charter, let us recommit ourselves to the true spirit of liberty, the true spirit of religious freedom, and promise that we will work together to do all in our power to keep it alive in the hearts of the American people. Thank you very much.